steadfastcigars.com.
LivingHeritageHomeschool.com.
Welcome back to Eschatology Matters. I'm your host, Josh Howard. And before we start in today, I want to ask if you've ever wondered how you could possibly homeschool all your children at the same time. Have you ever felt a tension between discipleship and academics? Have you ever longed for a beautiful, uncomplicated, theologically sound curriculum that will not bow to the spirit of the age? Well, you can look no further than Living Heritage Homeschool. Living Heritage Homeschool. This offers a family-style K-12 curriculum that's centered on beautiful, well-written books that spark the imagination and reach the heart. Your children will be grounded in the Church Fathers, the Puritans, apologetics, classic hymns, literature and art, creation science, biblical Greek, and more. Living Heritage helps students go deeper through expert video and audio instruction, and everything is built on a daily homeschool, built for the daily homeschool family by trustworthy Reformed theology to prepare your children to live for Christ in the world. All in an open-to-go format. Find the curriculum you've been looking for. So you can visit livingheritage.info. That's livingheritage.info. You can get 10% off your first curriculum plan when you use the promo code Eschatology. I see that in all caps on my notes. So full caps Eschatology at your checkout. Again, that's the code Eschatology, and you can find it at livingheritage.info. Boys, I'm hoping that our chat goes a lot smoother than that ad read because I just stumbled all through that. But I'm joined today by George and John. Guys, so glad to talk with you guys today.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, so we have had this project, Eschatology Matters. Brandon Wood and I kind of co-founded this project following a conference that Brandon did on a whim 3 years ago, and we launched into Eschatology Matters, and God's blessed it in many ways, and we've enjoyed the ride, and still continuing on with Eschatology Matters. But we started feeling a little bit of a need for some material that specifically addressed covenant theology issues. And I say that kind of broadly. Within the Reformed spheres and covenant-minded spheres, there's a lot of topics that are perennially needing to be addressed, and also some things that are under kind of attack in our current day and age that we thought would be helpful to address. So Brandon Wood, as he is wont to do, was the poking rod that moved this project forward, and the rest of us are begrudgingly willing participants in it. But I think this is going to be really helpful. So George and John are both representative of our Covenant Matters podcast, and we're starting this off as sort of it's not exactly a channel of Eschatology Matters. It's a standalone podcast, but very much related, and we share a lot of the same overhead and stuff. You could think of those as two peas in a pod or two people in a family. But I'm asking you guys if you wouldn't mind just kind of introducing yourselves, maybe giving a little bio information. George, you're up at my top left on my screen. You want to start in?
Sure. I'm a pastor of a church called Meadowview in Lexington, North Carolina, about an hour north of Charlotte. But I'm taking a new role, as I said in that intro video, to Ministry to State. And Ministry to State is a PCA, a ministry within the PCA that serves to disciple, witness to, encourage, pray for government officials, elected officials, government workers. And I'll be in Florida. So I'll be the state capital minister to Florida. And I'm really looking forward to that and excited about it. But my background is varied. I'm 50 now, so I'm not a young man. I've been an engineer with Procter & Gamble. I've been a school teacher and administrator in multiple schools. I've started businesses, but the Lord saw fit and has been gracious to make me a pastor, and I love it. So,
very good. I don't know if you've been to Florida recently. We went to Florida. We had our 20th wedding anniversary, and my wife and I went down there because she loves the beach, and I went because I'm a good husband. And I don't know if you've noticed this, George, but it's hot in Florida. It's just hot everywhere.
It's hot everywhere, man. It's almost 100 here in North Carolina. But yeah, they've been having a heat wave. Yes, we were down there 2 weeks ago.
I wanted to warn you in case you didn't know this.
I know. You know. Well, I mean, I look at my the melanin content in my skin. I am Arabic, but I bronze up. But I'm from South Florida, so okay. But we're moving the family down to Friday, actually. So.
Very cool. God bless the trip. Yeah, and
Thank you.
That sounds excellent. I come from German heritage, so we just kind of catch fire in the sunlight. We don't react well to it. But John, introduce yourself, brother. Give us a little recap on what you're up to and a little bio information.
Yeah, so John St. Martin, currently pastoring a church in Mankato, Minnesota, which is a college town, Reformation PCA, and it's a church revitalization work. I used to actually be a member of this church as I was graduating college. I went to school here. Worked in business for a little while, started a painting company, sold all that, went off to seminary, planted a church, and now I'm here. I had a little stint in the Christian publishing world too. But yeah, so I'm married. I got 5 kids. Actually, my wife just had our 5th 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
Wow,
so
praise God, man.
so we got a full home, and we're enjoying what the Lord's blessed us with. So yeah, I've been here about 2 years, and I'm not sure how I got roped into this podcast, but I got the text, and it seemed interesting to me. So here we are.
The signing bonus, Brandon floated that signing bonus, and it was just too heavy for any of us to pass up. I know how it is. You were all swayed by the dollars. No, that's awesome. So it's going to be fun to talk to you guys, I think, on, and I encourage, if anybody's benefited from Eschatology Matters, please pop over there, give a subscription to Covenant Matters, and I'm hoping that this will be a worthwhile venture. I know my co-hosts are as well, and we want to not repeat any or retread any ground that anybody else is already doing. There's lots of Reformed guys with podcasts. But we do want to talk about some covenant theology stuff that I don't know is being addressed, certainly at an accessible or lay level that we're going to try to aim for in a lot of these ventures, to try to draw people into the conversation. So, Lord willing, God blesses it. I'm looking forward to some chats in the future on that. But today, though, since you are on Eschatology Matters, we're going to talk some eschatology, and I don't know how I don't know how long to expect this to go. I don't even know exactly where it's going to go, which always makes for a fun one. I have 2 bullet points. I was telling you guys before we started recording, I have 2, which is unlike us at Eschatology Matters. But we were talking a little bit about Postmil, Amil type stuff. I was over on, I think I've done 2 interviews on other people's podcasts in the last couple of weeks, and both were on this topic of optimistic amillennialism. And I'll reserve my comments for our discussion. But one of the things that was being brought up, and I think we kind of broached it while we were talking a little bit, and it was like, well, this will be a fun introductory chat for the CM crew over here on EM. But let's talk about whether or not optimistic amillennialism is a useful term. Useful is how it is in my notes. I almost want to say, is it a helpful or good term? But maybe we can walk through that a little bit. Optimistic amillennialism is a newer term. It's not something that you find. I don't know when the first usage of it probably was. I know Sam Waldron just wrote a book that I believe he titled Optimistic Eschatology or Optimistic Amillennialism. So that would certainly kind of put it on the forefront of discussions. But this is a pretty recent term. You guys help me wade into this a little bit with optimistic amillennialism. What have you seen? Is it good? What do you think?
You're baiting us so you could smack us down?
Oh, I'm absolutely baiting you. Yeah, this is what this is, man. This is my softball up in the air.
I find it useful. It probably wasn't necessary at some point, maybe 100 years ago, maybe 50 years, I don't know. But given how the spectrum has so widened on what is Postmil and often the loudest voices in that camp, I find optimistic Amil a helpful designation. I identify I identify as that. So there's your postmodern
there we go.
Answer.
Those are your pronouns? Yeah.
Right. Because I also think so many Amil people are pessimistic, particularly from the R2K camp or whatever. And, or even, well, John MacArthur's a dispensationalist, but, when he said we lose here, that seems like the attitude of a lot of guys that call themselves Amil. Yeah. And I certainly don't want to be associated with that either. So
how about this? Okay, so we could recognize, first of all, we're PCA guys, and that's probably, amillennialism is probably, what, 99.999% of PCA folks, or at least pastors running around, at least seems like a heavy majority, right? So amillennialism is definitely like on the radar. But if we could back up a little bit, I want to maybe get your definition, George, of what you're seeing different with optimistic amillennialism versus plain vanilla amillennialism. Because one of the things we've tried to walk through at Eschatology Matters is when you think about like kind of like the broad buckets, right? Like these huge camps that we're working with, we're really working with premillennialism and postmillennialism, like broadly speaking, right? I'm not talking about the postmils you were talking about just a minute ago. But just broadly, this is, does Christ return before the millennium pre, or does he return after the millennium post? And those are the other two. So over here on the post side, that's what we're examining then. And within that, you have modern day postmill and amill distinctions. What are you seeing within the amillennial camp that would cause you to attach the descriptor optimistic? Like, what are you aiming at with that?
It almost seems Gnostic in a lot of ways, like this world doesn't matter. Christ, in this time, we're just saving
The,
souls. I
the
mean, it's very,
non-optimistic version you're talking about.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that identify as Amil, and they don't really care about this physical world. And the way that plays out is it doesn't like personal piety is just spiritual. There's no sort of outworking into the world itself because this world's going to hell in a handbasket. And that again, the sort of the MacArthur phrase of, even though that he's obviously pre-mill, but that we lose here. They have that attitude, and why should we think that the Holy Spirit that empowers us and works both in us and in the world is it's it's very dispensational in that it's all about saving souls and getting in an escape pod and leaving.
Okay.
That's why I started getting uncomfortable considering myself a mill, is when I'm hearing all these guys speaking in those terms.
Yeah.
And so, but not fully convinced of, and this goes to the second part of your question, like a golden age, not comfortable with some of the post mill sort of vision either. So
Let me throw that out there, and then John, I'm going to swap over to you. Okay, so the second question, and we're just floating both of them out here at the beginning and seeing where we get with them. The second question was whether belief in a golden age, and I think we were really talking about a future golden age, was required to be post-mill. So whether this belief that in the future, at some point, this is the typical articulation of a futuristic golden age, at some point in the future, whether we perceive it to start or not, so it could start kind of imperceptibly, or at least to us imperceptibly, but in any case, this is like predominant among Puritans, that there is a future golden age that will come, and that age is oftentimes a literal 1,000-year age, but it's also an age of gospel success, both in heaven and on earth, and prosperity, and all of the kind of post-millennial hope that you could wrap up into that. John, what are you thinking as you're hearing this? Tell us right now what brand you're getting. Are you getting that post-mill brand, or are you ascribe? No, like where are you coming down on all this?
No, so I think the rise of optimistic Amil is a result of kind of that post-mill, right? People got introduced to postmillennialism. I think a large part of that, maybe it's less prominent now, is R.C. Sproul's The Last Days According to Jesus, right? And as people kind of went down that path, that's a great hashtag, by the way. It's nice to put in your bio. It's kind of like just this based thing you can say all the time. But I think as people navigated further into the history and the view, they kind of thought, maybe I'm misusing that word. At least that was kind of my experience. And so I use the term optimistic Amil often, but I think even the characterizations we kind of been making about amillennialists is maybe overstating like the normie Amil position. I don't know that they're necessarily pessimistic. If anything, it goes along with, a millennium means no millennia, right? And I think they just it's almost indifferent in terms of how things are going to play out. But being exposed to kind of the more post-mill, realizations of these promises of Scripture, as the knowledge of the Lord is going to cover the earth, all of those kind of things coming to bear, and or even the parables of the leaven making its way out, the spread of the kingdom, those kind of narratives were helpful, I think, in this current generation of people thinking through what our expectations ought to be. What does Christ's rule look like now? A lot of what you were talking about, George, too, it's kind of like adjacent to eschatology proper, because we're talking about, R2K, or, the two kingdoms kind of thing. And a lot of our optimism or pessimism or engagement or expectations, while it's related to eschatology, also is related to our view of the church and society and, apologetics. All of those things are all tied into it. And so you don't have to be pessimistic if you're amillennial, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't know that, I don't think most people would call themselves that. So it would be maybe disingenuous to say, I'm a pessimistic Amil. Yeah, so is it a good word? I think it's helpful for explaining to people your view, but I think the real difference now is not so much optimistic or pessimistic, it's preterism. In fact, as I was going through my ordination, this is a while ago now, but I had to write a paper on my views of eschatology, and everybody in the presbytery read it, and then during my exam it kind of came up, and one of the elders said, "Oh, so you believe that Revelation chapter 7 is already fulfilled, 9 is already kind of like was going through." And I was like, "Yeah, don't you?" Like, I didn't realize that wasn't normal, or that there were there was a pretty large subset of people who aren't as developed in the preterism in terms of where they view things as being fulfilled in 70 AD. And so I think that's probably a more significant distinction in the optimistic Amil. At least it seems that way, where there's overlap with the Postmil kind of thought, but it really is this more advanced partial preterism that I think has really kind of taken root lately.
So yeah, and I can dig the partial preterism angle, because I'm one of the strange guys that falls more into what I would describe as a postmillennial frame, and yet I don't take Revelation to be preterist. I take Olivet discourse preterist interpretation, but not Revelation. Although I could be won over if we could find almost any writing outside of Irenaeus's testimony, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, what I think a lot of guys struggle with is what you were describing, which is like, where's that dividing lever? Now, this is going to be, I'll state my case, or I'll state my position, and then try to make a brief case and hear what you guys have to say. So I am going to take the minority position. I'm going to say that optimistic amillennialism is not a helpful term, and that we should get rid of it. And I'm also going to say that we should move back to being all postmil, and then talk about what kind of postmil we are. Now, I know it's not going to be a popular one. Let me plead my case. So if we look back through like the historical development of these terms, and you go back to, like, let's say the old Princeton crowd, you've got the Hodges serving at Princeton, you've got Warfield coming along after them, and then you've got this whole like second generation, you could call it, of theologians that are kind of birthed out of the old Princeton crowd, and then they all go off into various seminaries and start developing a lot of the eschatological and also biblical theological thought that we have today. So this is, we're talking 150 years ago or thereabouts. When you have that happen, there's this probably apocryphal story. I don't know that anybody's ever verified it, but this argument between Gerhardus Voss and B.B. Warfield, and they're arguing back and forth. It's kind of reminiscent of Luther's argument with was Zwingli, I think he was arguing with, where he kept on pounding the table and saying, it says the body of Christ, that whole argument. It's kind of like that. So I really hope it actually happened. But the argument is that B.B. Warfield kept on saying Christ returns to a redeemed earth, and Gerhardus Voss kept on yelling back, Christ returns to redeem the earth. And that's kind of like the beginnings of what we then see begin to be termed amillennial thought versus postmillennial thought. If that's accurate, even if the story may not be 100% true, if that's an accurate depiction of how these kind of modern strands have come, the disagreement is on something you could frame it as optimism, right? So a lot of guys nobody wants to be described as pessimistic, and I don't even know if that's a good descriptor. I think there are pessimistic. I think if you're saying we lose down here, like George is bringing up, that sounds pessimistic. But really what you're talking about is pessimism as far as the success of the kingdom in this world. You're not saying like nobody's saying Christ loses, but you're saying, like, what do you expect the kingdom to look like here? Do you expect it to grow and flourish, or do you expect it to be like 10 believers left on a hill with the pagan hordes surrounding them. Like you can still say that's success and that's valid, but that's not a very optimistic expectation for the kingdom here. So if that's true, and that's where this kind of divergence comes, the actual thing that lies behind what you were describing, John, what lies behind that is Christ's kingdom expressed in the heavens? This is where Gerhardus Voss came in with clarity, or is it expressed in heaven and in the earth during this millennial period, as B.B. Warfield keyed in on? I think that's the dividing line. And from that, you get a lot of the optimism versus pessimism. You get a lot of the preterism. You get a lot of these other things. But the theology behind it is the kingdom of God as it's advancing, is it advancing only in the heavens? And it may bear fruit on the earth, but that's not primarily what it's about. It's a heavenly spiritual reign. Or is it something that is heavenly and spiritual, such to the fact that we can count things that are in this temporal world as actual kingdom victories? You know, we can look around and actually see, for example, good laws passed. This is where I think a lot of postmills get in trouble because they take this a bit sideways. But in any case, that you can look at like good things happening in this world and say, yes, this is actually a tangible effect of the kingdom because it's not only spiritual, it's both spiritual and temporal. Does that make sense? And give me any pushback you got. George, what are you thinking?
No, I'm tracking with you.
Okay.
So I would agree. I would just say that you want to push everybody to be post-mill. I don't think that actually does justice to the word. Where I would say we can drop the optimistic from the designation, and even that debate you're talking about in some ways is kind of this line, if you will, of optimism versus pessimism versus whatever that might be in the middle, because postmillennialism and premillennialism are kind of two sides of a coin, where they both look for this manifestation of the kingdom on the earth for 1,000 years before Christ comes, right? Or after, whatever. One is before, one's after. And that, if you hold to a framework that doesn't have a millennium, right? A millennial, in the literal earthly sense of that reigning on earth in some sort of tangible way, then you're not post that. You'd be post Amil.
Well, that's not
Right?
so like for example, what's his name? Anthony Hoekema, who's one of like my favorite Amil authors. He wrote in the Bible in the Future, and he's very clear that and I don't know that I've ever read an amillennial author that would say there is no millennium.
Right.
There's got to be one out there, but I've just never read the guy.
No,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
go ahead, George.
And
No, I was going to say, I mean, like my understanding of this early on was it's that it's a symbolic millennium. Like we believe in it, but it's now. Like the kingdom is spreading, Satan is bound, Christ is plundering the nations. The difference is in what's the expectation in the physical earth, and that's why I do think Amil is a helpful category as opposed to post-mill. The problem is, again, the spectrum keeps widening on what each person is saying, and that's why and you're right, like nobody would say they're pessimistic. The question is like that's something we're imposing upon them. I think I even heard who's the guy with is Chris Gordon about Abounding Grace Radio. Like he takes offense when his position, because he's out there in R2K land, is called pessimistic. They're not pessimistic because they believe Jesus wins. But they don't really have any expectation on this earth. So
Yeah.
to me, the issue is, what are you expecting to happen here? And I think a faithful Amel position would say, well, as the gospel spreads and as people's lives are changed, then society is going to be changing. And so you can expect fruit of the kingdom, but that's not really what's important. What's really important is that the souls are saved,
Right.
And so the question to me is, to what degree do you expect, again, to go back to your second question, the golden age? Like, is there a golden age? And do post-mill people think it's a literal 1,000 years, or is they speaking too of a figurative 1,000 years, but just expecting more
Yeah.
natural consequences to Christianity?
And that's so I got to make this plea before, because we do need to go to the golden age question. But part of my plea I'm not actually, John, trying to convert everybody to Postmil. I hope I'm not trying to convert everybody to Postmil. I honestly, I want less differentiation and more conversation and I want us to find more cohesion with our eschatological views. And my fear is that the more we spread things out, the more we actually just separate off views, and it becomes more confusing and more diffused among Christendom, such that we don't actually have. If you look at, for example, theories on the atonement, you can look at a lot of. I mean, I wrote my dissertation on Christus Victor theme. You can look at those things, and yet among many of us, we would say, penal substitutionary atonement. This is sort of the thing, the anchor at the center of the diamond, and there's different facets, but this is really what we're anchored on. That's an effort to actually bring together a shared understanding. And my fear is that the more we spread apart, we threaten that because at Eschatology Matters, we have had guys propose theories, and some of them very good, and some of them from still seated seminary professors. And it's, some prefix with millennial at the end. We're probably up to like 24 at this point. I don't know that that's helpful. I really don't know that that's helping actual Christians grapple with these things and actually come together, or at least understand where we're different. Hey, George and I are both post-mill, but we see these things a little bit differently, and you should know that. Like that would bring a little more cohesion. So it's kind of been where I've been.
So you want to do away with Amil altogether, or just the optimistic part of it?
We're just talking about optimistic today. I'll come for other terms later. In all things, I would like to move us towards some sort of shared consensus among Reformed Christians that we can confess some sort of shared eschatological consensus, the same way we have with Christology and many other areas within Christian theology, that will actually be working toward more shared consensus as opposed to trying to further out our lack
So
of
you're trying to do what even the Westminster Assembly couldn't do?
Wow, man, you just really set me up on a hard crowd, George.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
think, it is interesting that that's like kind of absent. So it's very short in the standards. I mean,
for sure. No, I'm fine with don't think I'm trying to say this is supposed to rise to some level of creedal orthodoxy. I'm not saying that. I think the Nicene Creed knocks it out of the park, right? Christ will return to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end, etc. But I think that especially among those of us who share such a shared covenantal understanding, I think we can do better than, like, let's say 18 different categories, floating around out there. We can have a little bit better way of describing it. That's all.
I agree. The multiplicity of categories is probably unhelpful, but I'll stick to my guns that they should all be called amillennial because you're using that framework for the millennium. So, because even
which came first, John?
Well, so this is the thing. If you're talking about, we'll get to the golden age now, but
Yeah.
this, I don't know what the word is. The millennium we're in right now, right? It's not a literal 1,000 years. It's figurative. It's the reign of Christ from heaven. And if we're calling that the millennium in this post-millennial framework that you're trying to put us into, and there's also a golden age, then you're actually a post. It's like a double millennium, post-double, right? And
That would not fit.
So that's the framework of the millennial view. So this is millennial view versus outcome, I guess, is still amillennial at its essence. And so we just got to make the other guys more optimistic, and we'll just take it over that way.
So John, would you say that, like, because like a big post-mill scripture, and I actually agree with their use of it, is Psalm 2. He who sits in the heavens laughs, so is that basically what you're saying there? So it's this, Christ is reigning from heaven, and it's a figurative reign here, and people are supposed to be coming in, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with what we're in right now. We're in the millennium now. So when I said no millennium, that's just the word Amil, which is
right.
That's a bad name in its own, because it's not necessarily clear. So no, I think those are all. I agree. We don't need more designations, but I think trying to redefine postmillennialism to fit us into it, I think, is a bad idea.
How about this one? What if so you would just a couple clarifying questions, John. So, you would probably ascribe to like a kind of two age model of eschatology. There's this age, the world that is passing away, and then there's the inbreaking of the age to come in Christ, which will consummate on his return. Would that be somewhat fair?
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, I'm thinking they're like kind of Gerhardus Voss, Pauline eschatology territory. That's pretty standard among Amil. I hold to a two age. Would you say that the millennium began with Christ's first coming, whether you're going to frame that at his incarnation, his resurrection, his crucifixion, his ascension, wherever you kind of place it? I kind of fall along the lines of Greg Beale, where I'm not exactly quite sure where to place it. I just say the whole ministry, and that seems to be what's referred to. But either way, the millennium starts with Christ. It concludes with his return, final return. On board?
Sure.
So, would it be returning to Amil to confess those truths if guys confessed those truths that called themselves Postmil long before the term Amil became used? Or is that saying that there have been some Postmil guys who have been quite divergent, but that's not a good reason to throw away the term?
When did the term post-mill enter the scene? So even this, like we come through, I just saw a thing the other day, earlier today, Brockel's 4 volumes, when it was translated, they left out his eschatology,
Wow.
because he's post-mill sounding, and a lot of the Puritans, same thing. They're not well-formed positions like we have now. They have that same impulse, but
Yeah.
we've created the categories afterwards. Like we got the book, the case for amillennialism, right? these books. And so I think even the term postmillennialism is fairly new in the sense of trying to define some of these things and work out the details. And so
You could say it's new, but it's definitely the term amillennialism was created in the aftermath of Old Princeton to differentiate it from
sure,
postmillennialism.
yep,
So one did come first, John, right?
yeah. But what's the differentiation they were making, and do you hold to that? Because if you
Yeah.
hold to that differentiation, then
So
you have to go with the new line.
here's my case, and this is historical theology more so than, like my field's systematic theology, and that's where I'm most comfortable. So this is, wandering into the historical records. The literal 1,000-year golden age you see real pronounced among the Puritans. You don't see it, and again, it's dicey to do eschatology by century, right? Because there was many points at which guys were just simply not writing on that was not on the front view. They're battling Christological heresies or any number of things. So sometimes guys just quite simply didn't say a whole lot about eschatology. But when you do have it, you don't really see that view both before and after as pronounced as you do during the time of the Puritans. Now, with this kind of like modern resurgence in post-mill, you could say, I don't know if I'd frame this like coincidental with the Young Restless Reformed, but maybe somewhere in the last, like, let's just say the last 10 years, there was kind of a resurgence in hashtag that post-mill, right? This popular post-mill. You might have seen a couple of guys talk about a future golden age starting in the future. But even then, I would say that the vast majority, the vast preponderance of postmillennial authors have not held to a future golden age, nor do I. So I wouldn't say I don't know why that would be a categorically definitional requirement to be postmillennial, that you are looking for a future golden age, the one that starts at some punctiliar point in the future, as opposed to what we just confessed, that it is the entirety between Christ's first and second comings.
I think it's in the name. I mean, that's what they mean by millennium and post millennium, right? Post
No,
millennial.
no, post mill is just saying Christ returns post the millennium. It's referring
Post,
to Christ's return. When to expect that?
yeah. So there's some divergence there. But I think you mentioned kind of the modern resurgence of this stuff. And that was for me, I went through all this, went through those books. I love Gentry and Matheson, just kind of these guys. That was my introduction to some of this. And it wasn't until that ordination paper where I really started digging into some other guys. And actually, R. Scott Clark has some okay kind of lectures and things on this too, in terms of definitions. And so that was when I realized, oh, these guys aren't even really like, they're presenting something new. It's kind of like postmillennialism, but it's not like the old school postmillennialism. And so I think that it is what it is now. I mean, these books exist, and most of the influence has already been had. But it seems like it's a pretty distinctive thing. The other thing I would say about postmillennialism, or one of the reasons I stopped thinking of in those terms, I'm as optimistic as you could possibly be. You know, at realizing things ebb and flow, but there's a real dynamic there of this. Okay, so maybe you don't believe in a golden age, but I would think that if you're using the word post-mill, your expectation is overwhelming success. And that's when Jesus comes back. Some sort of overwhelming, like there has to at least be some like blip on the radar where we've entered into ushering in Christ's return, or at least that impetus seems to be pretty central to post-mill thought. And I don't think that does justice to some of the parables about the growth of the kingdom, the wheat and the tares, and the rise, the world becoming more wicked as he succeeds. And so, and then probably my most, and maybe I'm wrong on some of the stuff, but my most important critique is the imminency of Christ's return. I can be optimistic all day, and things look like they do right now, right? The news report is real dire, and Jesus can come back, and my optimism wasn't wrong. Whereas if there's a future hope that's required to fulfill to some level that's delaying Christ's return, I think that's the imminency of his coming, I think is gets lost in there. It almost can let you sit on your hands. Maybe that's how people are doing, but those are just some of the things I think about when I worked through postmillennialism, and why I don't think the moniker, if I was going to use the moniker, I would want to use it in the fullest sense to say, here's what I thought was presented as.
The imminency thing is interesting because I think we would, and by the way, I was kind of like messing with you a minute ago, so I hope I didn't push too hard there, but I love this stuff and it's really entertaining to me. But when you look at like imminency, for example, so I think we would all confess that Christ can return when he pleases. We're also not to know the day or the hour. So really, when we talk about imminency, it's more of a refusal to have an expectation than it is an actual expectation. Because I think all the millennial views, dispensational premillennialism, historic premillennialism, all of them have sort of if you were to ask them to plot it out, they all have expectations that they expect to see before Christ's return. Now, everybody's going to be very cautious and say, look, I might not be aware of that. Like God may be bringing revival in areas of the planet, like whatever God's doing, right? But every millennial view is characterized, this is how they describe themselves, with expectations of what that return looks like. So I don't know that that's just a post-mill bug. I think that's a good warning, like what you just gave, John. I think it's a good warning for any of the millennial views. But in general, how about this for clarification? So when we say optimistic amillennial, you guys have spoken in favor of it. I've given the minority critique of this. Would you say that it would be fair to say that we will see less and less Christians toward the end, and maybe less gospel influence born from that? That because there is less and less Christian influence, there's less and less kind of impact upon society and upon the nations. And that's kind of the trend line until such time as Christ returns, although he is triumphing in heaven in the spiritual sense. Would that be a fair qualification or characterization of it? Or correct me if that's not how you're seeing. Like, how would you describe that part? If you're not seeing, for example, a postmillennial, I think it's pretty much shared with every postmillennial, an uptick in more and more being saved and more and more gospel influence, the nations submitting to Christ, however long that might take. If that's not what you're seeing, what are you seeing within that optimistic Amil framework?
Are you saying that guys that would associate as optimistic Amil believe that things are getting worse and worse? Is that what you just? I missed the
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak for every optimistic Amil guy. I know that some guys who have described themselves as optimistic Amil have said that the light shines brighter even as the dark shines, or dark can't shine, but as the darkness grows darker, right? So that you can actually have gospel triumph even though persecutions are ramping up. against, persecutions against Christians are ramping up, and that Christian influence among the nations is waning, and all of those sort of things. And I don't know where they would go as far as conversions go, but I've definitely heard that. I'm just asking, like, what is your take from an optimistic Amil perspective? Do we see more conversions toward the end? Do we see more? And you've tied conversions to kind of gospel outworking in this world, even secondarily. Do we see more of that, or do we see less of that? Like, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is how I describe pessimistic Amil, or the reason why I'm trying to differentiate myself from whatever that Amil is
Gotcha.
to optimistic, to say it's not a flat line. It ebbs and flows, and we can expect that where the gospel spreads, that things improve in those areas, and I mean that's just clear in Western civilization, even as though sin then also comes in. But I mean, like the counter question that I would have to that, to the post mill side of it, is, do you see, so how in a post mill where it is sort of a ramping line, increasing the fruit of the gospel, the kingdom of God on earth, what where do you place the events in Revelation or in any eschatological work that talk about the increased suffering toward the end? Like, so then does the increase just sort of stop, and then there's this period of suffering, like a tribulation, like the dispensationalist will view, or you, like, that's where preterism or partial preterism comes in, and no, that was just in the past.
Are you talking about like the Great Tribulation that's referred to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So most of us would take the Great Tribulation, and I'd throw in, like, again, I brought up B. Warfield a minute ago, would throw that into the entirety of the church age and not some, again, future punctiliar event or time or even time period. That again, though, that's not necessarily post-millennial, because you find that among plenty of amillennial guys as well. So that's where I would land, but that's not, I don't think it's necessarily a inherently post-millennial thought. The thing with the post-millennial position that I do think Twitter and popular online talking heads these days have kind of messed up a little bit is, I have yet to read a post-millennial author, including the guys you brought up, Gentry, Matheson, any of the modern guys even, that would describe it as a steady line upward. This is a,
Ebbs and flows.
yeah, huge ebbs and flows, and we may be in a dip that lasts for 800 years of darkness. Like that does not actually chip away at it. You get the sense, if you look at Christian history, like the last 2,000 years of Christian history, I would describe as a slow growth. It's a ever upward growth, but there were some very dark times, and we're aware of those. Christian persecution has not gone away or anything of that nature. So, yeah, that's kind of how I'd answer that. Did I get your question in full there, George? Did I miss something on that?
No, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I think there's some value in the sense of like rising wickedness alongside the spread of the kingdom. I think that that's a theme we see, and you can see that just in history, right? Anything that's good or helpful can be used for good and also for evil, right? Think of any technological advancement we've seen. We've seen the rise of infant mortality rates going down, and extended life and all these medical advances, and then we also see the horrors of abortion and all of the other sides of what medical technology is being used for. And so I think those aren't necessarily in conflict, but the idea that it's like getting worse for Christians, or there's going to be less Christians, I think is kind of antithetical to any sort of positive view, in the sense that the church is becoming more and more victorious, and the world's hating it more and more, and those are going to be more pronounced. And so it doesn't mean that the church. I've never heard anybody say we'll have less conversions towards the end in any sort of optimistic framework. That's new to me. But
I guess what puzzles me, like honestly puzzles me, John, like and this is one of my reasons for just kind of beefing with the description, is that one of my contentions would be that if light shines, that darkness can't darker if the light's shining brighter. Did I say, is my Southern grammar coming through well on this? If light is shining ever brighter, it actually dispels darkness, like that, by virtue of what light is. That's what it does. So I think a lot of those analogies, I don't agree with them, because if the light is actually shining brighter and broader, I think it actually inherently by dint of what it is, it dispels darkness. I don't think they can coexist in that nature. That's a zero-sum game. But that being said, what I don't understand from some of the optimistic amillennial guys is, if because you guys have said like, if we're having more conversions, and I think all three of us would agree conversions is like the spirit at work is what is doing this thing. So if you're seeing that, how could you be seeing more and more and more conversions and yet at the same time less, or at least not increasing societal, cultural, among the nations influence of the kingdom?
Well, because history, right? So again, Western civilization, you have the gospel coming in, spreading, even under corrupt churches, but still, like, then the fruit of the gospel, like, just the explosion and everything from science to uh, social benefits and services and whatever. But what do you see Western civilization doing? So here you had this explosion of conversion, a few hundred years ago, and now you see everybody leaving the gospel, and yet the fruit is still there. So, I think that's what we see. So I think in a post-mill paradigm, we haven't seen what y'all are looking for yet, and so we don't know. Like, the gospel's gone around the earth like a fire, and it burns hot, and then it gets cold. Everywhere it's gone. There's no sustained place that the gospel has spread, and conversions. Yes, they increased, and it went great, but then successive generations walked away. And we haven't seen it come back around again. So I think the Amil are saying we're not sure it's supposed to come back around again, but we're open to it. Like, yeah, can it go back around and go another cycle? I mean, I guess maybe that's what we're starting to see in a place like Africa or something. Maybe in the Middle East, it's obviously where it started, and now it's sort of coming back. But or is that it? Is it going to go around once? Like, the all the nations have come to Christ at some point in world history. And is that going to be the end? And I think that goes to John's point about imminency. I mean, I think the post-mill can't actually say Christ can return today, because clearly what you're expecting to see has not happened. But what Amil can say is, yeah, he can come back today, tomorrow, or it could be 10,000 years from now, because we don't have the same expectation necessarily, but we're open to it.
So I was doing some research the other day just for fun, kind of, asking AI questions. That's not research, actually, but we'll call it research. What the college kids are doing. And I asked, well, like, how many Christians are there in the world right now? What's the number? Is it
like currently it's like 3.2 billion or something like that?
Okay, I thought it was a little less than that, like 2.7 or something. Anyways,
Maybe.
so, but whatever the number is, I'll just say it said 3 billion. We'll say it was like, oh, there's 3 billion Christians. Of course, that's the most broad definition of a Christian. Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, probably even includes Mormons, right? And I said, well, how many Christians have there been in the history of the world since Adam? And it gave me the same number. And I said, why are you giving me the same number? We're talking, thousands of years, or even just since Jesus was on the earth, right? So the last 2,000 years. And so I started digging into that more and more. And I didn't realize this, but the population of the world exponentially grown. Like, if you look at the population in history at any given moment, like in the last, 100 years, 200 years, it's not like it's just got a little bit more. Like, it unprecedentedly massive growth. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, this all of these categories, like optimism, golden age, whatever. I'm thinking this is not to be overlooked, that something so significant has happened. Now, that's the result of a lot of things, of course, industrialization and theoretically less death from war and disease and all that. But that was eye-opening to me. Like, looking back over the last 2,000 years, what's the standard population of the world, in the millions, and all of a sudden we're at pushing close to 10 billion now. The majority of Christians that have ever existed have existed in the last, few hundred years, which is, it's pretty wild. So that doesn't necessarily affect my eschatology, but it was an interesting thing.
You're sounding awfully post-mill to me right now, John. I'm just saying.
But so to even maybe in some ways it is George's point point, like we have some view of what the golden age would look like, or something like that, or these things. And we're so short-sighted because we just don't have, we're worried about, picking up groceries on the way home. We're not thinking about the ages, right? The Lord of heaven and earth who created all things, and the ages of the redemption of coming to fruition. We don't see in the hundreds of years, the thousands of years, the way that, of course, God does. And so that was shocking to me to see that, because at the same time, if that's the case, let's say that curve right there, that's the golden age, boom, and we're almost at the end now. It doesn't look very golden to us, right? It probably looks golden to people that were before, in terms of the things we have in that. But we see the wickedness in the world. We see nuclear weapons. We see all sorts of things that are abominations, and yet we're living in a really interesting moment in history. And really, I think we're at the peak of that, right? Because we're talking about population collapse. Birth rates are down across the world, and places like Japan and South Korea and China and America are going to be very different places in another generation or two. And so, what does that mean as it relates to eschatology? I don't know, but it was really helpful for me to kind of get that out view of like, oh wow, look how many Christians there are now.
Yeah,
the number is basically the same as always, like the whole history, just because the population has grown that much. So
that's wild.
See, I think we should get rid of the Postmil category and just have optimistic or pessimistic Amil.
Amen.
We
Amen.
were so close.
We
were so. I'll say this because I just realized what time it is, and
Yeah,
I do have
sorry.
to run. But let me say this: for anybody who's watching, first of all, really appreciate George and John chatting this through, because nobody likes debating eschatology except for like thorough theology nerds, and I really appreciate that. But between Optimistic Amil and Postmil, I think hopefully what people will hear, because this is my whole beef with Optimistic Amil, is that we're not just like in the same canoe going the same way. We're paddling on the same side of the boat. Our grips are just slightly different on our paddle. Like it's so close. Like we are so close on these things, and that does give me great encouragement. So even though, yes, I poke around a little bit and maybe don't like the term, it's greatly encouraging because these things are vitally important. One of the things we've always tried to push at Eschatology Matters, you guys are in ministry, I'm in ministry, is that eschatology is supposed to lead to orthocardia, like it's supposed to actually lead to a heart change. So when you read these things, horrific incidents happening against Christians in foreign nations, dealing with church members who have lost loved ones, all those sort of things, like that hope, John, that you just described of a God who sees in thousands of years and down through the generations that have brought you here. Like that's that residing hope that I know we all share. So I appreciated the way you kind of landed the plane on that one, John. But got to wrap it up. George, John, thank you guys so much. Appreciate y'all joining me. And please pop over to Covenant Matters and follow us there. I think we have a Substack now too. Was that George? Is that correct?
It wasn't me.
Wasn't you?
John,
We're doing stuff. You got to keep up.
There's stuff happening, John. Yeah, I can't keep up with John, but thanks for having me on for sure.
Join John's Twitter Spaces, by the way, if you're not already. Jump on there and see the sparks fly. But guys, thank you all so much, George, John, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Seated here at my right hand, the Lord to my Lord did command, for of these heathen I will make a kingly footstool for your sake.